Ladies and gentlemen, village commissioners, we're going to call this meeting to order. This is the Village Council of Forest Parks, July 8th, 2026 budget meeting. This is the second in the installment of the budget meetings. This meeting will focus mainly on proposed revenue sources as we move into the next fiscal year. We're here at the community center, and we're going to have our clerk call the roll.
And Commissioner Bowe was excused for today. Commissioner Maxim here. Commissioner Mellon Ragovan here. Commissioner Nero is running late. Mayor Hoskins
Here. Okay, this is more of a workshop style. We're going to forego Robert Rules of Order today. I know that we have a few people here for public comment. So after we hear from public comment, we're going to turn it over to the village administrator and to the finance director for their presentations. And of course, commissioners will have the opportunity to make input and ask questions as we move along. Public comment.
So our first public comment is Dennis Miller. Want to take the mic? You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Dennis Miller. I'm one of the owners of Fat Tavern. What I want to do is give you an idea of restaurants, what's going on in the restaurant business right now. The fact that we're at war again, I'm sure prices will continue to go up. Example, these are a bunch of examples. Labor, I had a dishwasher. I was paying him $18 an hour. He got a job for $20 an hour. It's a constant struggle keeping help. There isn't a restaurant I know that doesn't need help. It's in Chicago. If they want to go in Chicago, they'll probably even make more money. A constant struggle. A couple of weeks ago on a Monday, I didn't have enough staff, so I served burgers and salads. I mean, this has never happened before. Food costs, crazy. It's at the point where prices go up and you don't even react anymore. It's just a common occurrence. Years ago when something went up substantially, you would call and say, "What's going on?" You don't even do that anymore. You just accept it. It's just the way it is. I mentioned food costs. For example, tomatoes 3 weeks ago were $100 for 25 pounds. We go through 5 cases a week. Hamburgers were about $7 a pound. Crazy. I had an issue with the meters. I was outside. Customers were leaving. They got a ticket. It's their first time at the restaurant. They said they'll never return. And I don't blame them. A profit margin for restaurants are about 8 to 10%. So it's rough. It's very rough. That's why so many restaurants don't make it. I think the average is 3 years for a restaurant. You can see what's happening on the street. They kind of go because it's so difficult and you're doing such a low profit margin. Liquor sales are down 5%. I think that's pretty much national. It's the fact that the trying to raise a 2% tax and no gaming in town. If I was looking in this area to open up a restaurant, that would be a factor. The fact that you want to raise taxes and no gaming. I know no gaming. I wish we had gaming. I don't know if that could ever come back. That would be great. Real estate taxes, I mentioned at the last meeting, mine went up like $40,000. Delivery charges. Every supplier I have charges delivery charge between $8 and $10, $12. One of the main liquor companies went from $7 to $12. So every time they come, that's a $12 increase. We have the PTO. Everyone has that. Well, then the bottom line is you raise taxes. So what do restaurateurs do? They increase prices. You increase prices, it hurts. people are so self-conscious about pricing. Everyone seems to complain every time you go out to dinner how expensive things are. And I think this added 2% would hurt business. Just a bad time, I feel, to raise taxes. That's it.
Justice Anthony Crawford.
So I spoke at the last meeting, not to reiterate the same things, but just something. Yeah, I think the message is pretty clear when it comes to places for eating tax. It just seems kind of like a singular take, especially for an immediate response to the village's revenue and budgeting issues. It was said last time, it's so easy, like a flip of a switch. It's so easy to really be looked into a little bit more in depth, right? Put in the groundwork to make sure that kind of decision is done with a full scope of information and the impacts that it would have. Something I would like to see is, of course, we could go through what's going to be talked about today, and it looks pretty extensive and thorough. But, based on the last meeting, it's like the only immediate change that could happen is the places for eating tax. I would like to hear about other ideas that could be implemented, like the flip of a switch. An idea I got, something I do on the side, and it's an issue that I discovered doing it, is I rent out apartments. It's really, here's a stat. 45% of households in Forest Park are rentals. I think the number is about 3,500 rental units in Forest Park. Let's say just a third of those have a car. There's not enough street parking. People have to become creative. They talk to neighbors. They contact local businesses like Silverland Bakery up the street when you rent on the 500 block of Des Plaines. To me, for the village, if there's a revenue issue, that's a missed revenue opportunity. I grew up in Forest Park. I think something we pride ourselves on is how open and clean our streets are, and that's why we have the overnight parking ban. However, I think we can provide a solution to a problem, a real problem, that when you rent in Forest Park, it's a hassle. It's like not everyone that rents in Forest Park sees that issue. So it would solve a problem. It is something that, it is a cost to the resident, but there's a benefit to it. And I think it could be done pretty swiftly. It might be a matter of getting some signage up and having a good plan. Park on one side of the street 1 week, as long as you have the permit, or 1 month is one side of the street, the next month is the other side of the street, just so that we don't have congested streets like some of the surrounding towns in Berlin and Elmwood Park in Chicago.
Okay, that concludes our public comment this meeting. Turn it over to the administrator.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get into discussion about revenue sources, I just want to give a brief overview of kind of where we're sitting. Like many of us who are in this room, the village is also experiencing increases in costs. This year, the projected year-end deficit for fiscal year 26, which is what we ended on April 30th of this year, is about 1.8 million. I want to stress that 1.5 million of that is, the village borrowing from itself to pay for is to pay its bills. The projected fiscal year 2027 budget deficit is $5.5 million. That is also carryover of the $1.5 million deficit for year end fiscal year 26. The village has no reserves available. We exhausted those last year. And so we don't have a savings account that we can dip into to borrow against. When we talk about increased expenses, the village is also seeing, similar to our businesses in the community, consulting services have gone up. Our legal costs, we're likely going to see a 9% increase there. IT services, 5% increase. Health insurance, we're anticipating a 20% increase in health insurance for calendar year 2027. Our liability insurance is going up. Our 911 services, in fiscal year 26, we saw a $500,000 operating increase. For fiscal year 2027, we're looking at a $313,000 increase. And that does not include the increases for having to upgrade the records management system and CAD system that's used by the departments to record their services and communicate with each other. Unfortunately, we are going to see a loss of revenue in a water tower lease. We have a company that is terminating their lease with us effective August 31st, 2026. That is a loss of $52,000 a year. We're right now in the process of somewhat negotiating or renegotiating another lease on the North Water Tower. We'll see where we get with that. We're still dealing with unpaid parking fines. We addressed that issue this past fiscal year by doing a parking ticket amnesty where people could come in and pay their parking tickets without the additional fines. We also instituted the boot program, which has, unfortunately, we haven't had to boot too many people, and the people that we have are coming in to pay what they owe. Real quick, I just want to kind of go over future needs and anticipated expenses that are going to be coming up. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about police and fire pension obligations that we need to address. In fiscal year 2028, we're going to be looking at the need for a new fire engine. Our fire apparatus vehicles, we are extending the life of these vehicles way longer than we should. And so that will be a general fund expense of approximately $1.5 to $2 million in the coming year. We need to, abide by the mandates for private side flood service line replacements. And so that will be additional funding. We were fortunate for the last 3 stages that we did to receive principal forgiveness loans from the IEPA. For this latest round that we applied for, we did not receive that funding. So we're going to have to come up with that money in order to continue doing that. And I want to state that that is a mandate that we are required to do. We're going to have continued water main and road work, which also includes lead service line work in that as well. We've talked a lot about the construction of the need for a new water reservoir. Again, with that money, not necessarily general fund money, but needing to be able to pay for that. Fiscal year 2028 is going to bring website and PDF ADA requirement updates. That will be a general fund expense. The village needs to seriously consider the implementation of a strategic plan. We don't currently have one. We do have a comprehensive plan that is approximately 14 years old, and so that will also need to be re-updated. Just so people get an understanding of that, we did an RFP about a year ago, and for the comprehensive plan alone, you're looking at about a $200,000 cost out of the general fund. We're going to need to address future staffing needs. In the past, when we have run into financial issues, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, the general fund supports 70% of it supports personnel. The general fund is what we use for operating. Resources personnel-wise have been cut in the past and not necessarily rebuilt up, and the workload is increasing. And so, we've talked a little bit about the fact that our finance department is 2 people, an assistant finance a finance assistant and then a finance director. You know, we'd like to add some personnel to that, an assistant finance director, and then possibly an additional finance assistant to help with the increased workload, also to address succession planning. The fire department has talked openly about their increased workload, particularly, you know, in the field of mental health assistance and the CTA. And so, you know, as we have seen the numbers go up, it is likely that in order for us to continue serving the community, we will need to add additional firefighters and paramedics. Public Works has held steady at their personnel level, but again, they're also seeing an increased workload. I'd also like to put in place, while our Director of Public Works has no plans to retire in the soon coming years, there isn't necessarily a plan for succession. And so I think that it's something that we should take a look at. The police department has struggled to be fully staffed. And so they're operating at a workload right now, understaffed. And so, you know, when we look at our general fund, the expenses for salary, particularly in that department, are not expended entirely because we are not fully staffed. The community center right now is operating without they are operating with a acting community center director, which means that the assistant director position is technically unfilled, and so they are down somebody. In the Department of Public Health and Safety, again, succession planning is something that we've talked about. They operate at a very low level when it comes to personnel. They do a lot with little staff, but you know, I certainly see the need for additional inspectors in addition to the succession planning. HR and the potential for a deputy village administrator in the future due to increased workloads. And then we have the vehicle replacement plan that is ongoing. You know, just the wear and tear that we have on our village vehicles due to everyday operating expenses. You know, is something that there was a plan put in place in the last couple of years, but we need to make sure that we are maintaining strong sources to be able to continue to fund that. At the moment, I know at least in the police department, we are unfortunately counting on special revenue funds in order to be able to buy the required vehicles that they need. We also have 2 vehicles in public health and safety that we just hope every day continue to get us another year, but they are approximately 15 years old. So we're going to have to take a serious look at updating those vehicles soon. Real quickly, I just want to kind of mention, you know, as we were going through the budget staff-wise, you know, there are some things that we have already implemented as far as cost reductions are concerned. You know, we are here today to talk about revenue, but I want to make it clear that, you know, as we went through the budget, we also looked at every which way we can possibly, you know, save some dollars. And so one of the ways we did that this year was our GEMT. So this is a program that helps us capture funds when through Medicare and Medicaid. The last couple of years, we've paid approximately $80,000 a year. And so our chief spoke to the company and the council actually just approved a new contract. That contract will be for $30,000 a year for them to help us with the cost report. So for a savings of $50,000 in this fiscal year. We recently went out to an RFP for our garbage, dark waste, and recycling contract. Not an easy thing to do when you've had the same company provide service for the community for 25 some years. That RFP resulted in an annual savings of about $290,000, and we were also able to lock in the rates for the next 5 years. And so those rate increases for the village will maintain itself the next 5 years. This year we put a beloved program, special event that, you know, for 24 years we've been putting on Grooving in the Grove. It's been put on pause this year for a savings of about $10,000, give or take. For some of the other events that we did put on, we worked hard to solicit donations. So for the 2 events, Pride Fest and for Juneteenth, this year probably saw the most number of donations that we've been able to secure. $6,800 was secured in donations to help offset costs for those 2 events. One of the things that we have done for many years as a perk for staff is to, during certain holidays, we would close Village Hall a couple hours earlier. We reduced that this year. We were finding that it was costing the village about $6,000 a day in comp time that we had to offset. And so we looked at the calendar this year, and we are not doing that for 5 of the 8 holidays that we typically have done that for in the past, resulting in $30,000 in wages that we are going to save on. Last year, the village looked at our leaf pickup and encouraged the community to bag, compost, and mulch. In fiscal year 2026, we immediately saw a savings of $4,500 in that area. Healthcare negotiations. Again, we typically have seen in the past an increase of anywhere from 3 to 5% for healthcare insurance for our employees. Last year, they came in at a little over 20% was what they were asking for. We negotiated and we made some changes to our program. We were able to bring that increase down to a 10% increase as opposed to a 20%. We already started meeting with our insurance broker so that we can be ahead of the game. But talking to my fellow colleagues who did not experience high increases last year, they are also seeing anywhere from 20 to 30% increases in healthcare insurance. One of our goals for fiscal year 2026 was to transfer the management of the crossing guards back to D91 and in its entirety. That contract ended on June 30th. And so while we have a little bit of an expense for this year, because it carried over into this fiscal year by 2 months, the village will see a savings of $23,000 in that. We've also reallocated expenses to restricted funds in order to alleviate some of the strain on the general fund. And so you'll see the police department they have a couple different restricted funds. We like to keep the operating expenses in the general fund whenever we can. However, the police department has had to rely on these restricted funds to help just basically make sure that we're providing training and vehicles and equipment to the police department so that they can continue delivering service to the residents and businesses of Forest Park. In the water fund, we've increased allocation of eligible salaries. We've moved hydrant and hose maintenance into that fund as well from out of the general fund. The VIP fund, we reallocated building and ground maintenance in fiscal year 26. And so those funds are now not in the general fund as well. MFT, so it's a motor fuel tax fund that we have. We've reallocated salts and street painting supplies, traffic signal, and street light maintenance from the general fund. And essentially what this does is, it takes the strain off the general fund for sure. However, it's reflected in this year's budget. We still are going to experience a pretty sizable deficit. But again, the goal is to return operating expenses to the general fund when available. By reallocating these expenses to the special funds, we have less funding for special projects, for infrastructure projects, or those other things that are not paid for out of the general fund. Any questions before I move on?
Year 2027, even after reallocating, we're still at like a $4 million net change.
So correct. So real quick, I just kind of want to go through some grants. The village depends on grant funding. We have been the recipient of a lot of grant funding the last couple of years. It certainly helped us get through quite a few lead service line replacements. We have received money to pay for certain police expenditures and staffing or hiring, I should say. Small equipment in the fire department. We got a grant to help us redo our building codes. We go for grants, however big or small, whenever we can. We will continue to do that. However, I do need to stress that grant funding is reliant on it being approved. One, we have to qualify, and two, it needs to be approved. So even though we have received grant funding in the past, there's no guarantee that we will continue to receive it in the future. And the perfect example is the fact that for 3 phases of our lead service line replacements, we were fortunate enough to receive principal forgiveness IEPA loans, which means that we paid nothing. They basically give us a loan and then they forgive it. And so for those 3 stages, we did not have to pay those loans back. That will not be the case with stage 4. We will continue to apply for grants and hope that, we qualify for stage 5, stage 6. What's happening now though is, I will say Forest Park was ahead of the game. Kudos to our staff for getting ahead of the game, and we have over 3,000 lead services that we needed to address. And so they started early, and we were fortunate to be at the top of the receiving end of funding from IEPA. Other municipalities are now, as the date approaches in which we need to meet these goals of having these lead service lines replaced, there are now new municipalities that are applying for these same grants. And so what I think might be happening is they're saying, oh, okay, well, we gave Forest Park 3 loans already. We need to spread the wealth a little bit. And so, again, we'll continue to keep applying for those loans, but we can't really guarantee that that's going to help us get through some of these projects. I'm going to now kind of hand things over to Commissioner Mellon Rogovin, who's going to talk about some community center grant ideas and some public work grant ideas. Again, I just want to stress, we're not afraid to go for grants. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for staff to gather up the information to apply for these grants. I give kudos to the Village Council for always supporting staff in going after these grants. They are not necessarily 100% grants, and so there's a matching portion of that typically comes along with it, and it's up to the Village Council to approve that. And anytime the village staff has come to the council to say, hey, we really think this is a necessary thing, it is going to cost the village some. However, we did our work on our end to fund some of it. They have always come back unanimously supporting us. So I want to say thank you for that. So I pass this on to Commissioner Mellon Rogovin.
So thank you, Administrator. So I want to say that in terms of grant funding, when I was at the Illinois Municipal League, and I facilitated a panel with the Illinois Department of Environmental Protection. They did say that not only was Forest Park ahead of the game with lead service lines, that our work was exemplary, and so that also put us in good stead to receive forgivable loans. So it's not only the fact that we were organized, but that our work with the folks that we work with to do the lead service line replacement is high quality. So I think that also bodes well with us getting grants in the future. So I have, folks may know that the work I do is to seek funding for philanthropic grants and public grants in the public sector. And for the past 9 months, I've been analyzing grants that the community center would be eligible for, as well as grants that our public works department is eligible for. And I have been, as a public works commissioner, always looking for funding for our public works department. And so first about the community center, one of the things that I have seen, especially coming out of the recent legislative actions in Washington and the new changes where there's SNAP funding is less available, increased need for support for childcare, after school care, and senior services and senior support. there's additional funding available for those services. And I've also analyzed the programs that the that our community center provides, and the numbers of people that are supported by our community center. And and when I pull grants, I also look at the eligibility and can Forest Park apply for them, and how much funding can be asked for. So there is a universe of about $1,200,000 worth of grants that are out there that we would actually be eligible for. For the community center that are in our wheelhouse, that would fund the services that the community center provides to seniors, to families that need social services, that for families that receive after school care, summer camp, all throughout the year, and after school care. So and so then it's all about the math. What are the likelihood of chances that we can provide or receive those grants? I have relationships, and we have relationships as a community with many of those funders. So I will be working with folks in the community center based on their availability, but also based on my knowledge and experience with those funders to start to identify the most likely and best sources of funding. Those grants range from $5,000 to $10,000 per grant to $50,000 and $100,000 per grant. So I've out of that universe of $1.2 million, my goal is to seek and receive $400,000 worth of funding for the community center per year. So that's my goal for that. Working, of course, with our staff and getting all the resources together for working as a team. It's important to note that it would cover current costs that are already budgeted, and staff salaries. So we would cover staff salaries, administrative expenses, things that are in the general fund. Similarly, in public works, there are expenses and programs related to environmental services and community services. There's an increasing level of interest in support services that, again, have to think a little creatively. But for instance, our sidewalk clearing program benefits seniors, people with disabilities, things like that. Funders in the philanthropic space are interested in those kinds of programs. So I know foundations, having been in that space for a long time, who would be interested in providing funding for those types of services for and cover the salaries for our community. So and then there's also environmental foundations who would be interested in increasing the effectiveness of things like our leaf collection program if it had an environmental impact, like protecting pollinators. So I'll be working with Director Stella on doing that and engaging residents, and it would save the village money and have an environmental impact. And again, it would also pay for or defray the costs that the village already pays for that program, and bring in revenue and pay for public works salaries. So these are the kinds of grants that I've already identified and will be implementing as we go forward.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions in regards to grants? Yes.
I know it's hard to answer, like, what are the chances of us getting these grants, but and I know it's great that we have good relationships with people. but I also don't see that as a guarantee that we're gonna get those grants. I'm wondering if there's any, or I think what I would like to see also, maybe simultaneously, is some of those conversations that we've been starting to have and have talked about having for a long time with the park district would offer to sort of assist with some of the programs that we're running. So, you know, the intention is never to get rid of any of these services, right? Like we need to protect our most vulnerable people, you know, the elderly people and the kids. But there have for many years been talks that kind of never went anywhere with the park district about them sort of taking over some of those services, combining with them. I'm wondering if that's something we could do maybe at the same time, just have those conversations too, to make sure that we, you know, have something lined up because as my understanding is the community center currently runs at a loss and to sort of.
So if I'm writing, if we're writing a grant to fund services for the community center, I would need to be writing grants to fund the community center services. So I can't propose something that won't exist. So in terms of, so I can't go to a funder unless we are committed to contributing or to continuing a service and providing a service. If there's something that the council would like to discuss about the community center, other than that, then yeah, we'd have to talk about that.
I did, there was a conversation that Rachel, we've been to know, sorry. That's a conversation that, you know, Rachel, you and I have had, and I've had with other council members, right? We've discussed that before too, kind of for years, you know, and no one's really wanted to take the initiative and make a move on that. So I'm wondering if we're effectively saying that's off the table for now, or are we deciding right now what our plans are moving forward on that?
I'm proposing it as a revenue generating. I'm proposing it as a revenue generating resource to because we can not only generate revenue for the community center for the current year, but it would be the ability, it would offer the ability for the community center to continue to operate effectively. The community center in my mind and in many, and has a wide variety of, a wide array of support within Forest Park. It operates and has a very unique mission in the village that is different than the park district. I think the park district is very valued and operates and has a very important mission as well. I think the community center provides a very specific resource to children with special needs and to seniors that isn't provided at the park district in the same way. And the multi level process that I would see funding the community center would allow them to become self-sustaining once we start the funding process, and it would not operate at a loss if we could start this process.
So I will say this, I did have I'll call it an informal conversation with Director Ivanelli from the Park District. You know, where she did express interest in collaborating with the village with regards to, you know, some of the programming it did. It's my understanding though, absent a building for the Park District, that they don't currently have the space to take on, you know, we'll just talk about, for instance, the child care program or that one in particular. They don't currently have the space to take on additional kids at this time. And so it's a conversation that, like I said, it was an informal conversation. She did express the interest in wanting to have those conversations. But as far as their immediate ability, if the village was even willing to do that, they don't have the immediate capability to be able to do that at this moment.
I just want to say the revenue we would free, the revenue we would free up or create would be for the general fund and give us flexibility to operate in different areas.
I hear you, and
Yeah.
it sounds really great, I just hate to, yeah. I hear you, and it sounds fantastic. I think my resistance, not even resistance, my reluctance, I guess I should say, is that, I don't think we ever really fully explored the other option that was presented to us several times, and I am wondering if it's worth at least one more discussion before we commit to one way of doing things. I think it's another viable discussion we could have with another taxing entity in town, and we never had the conversation that I think we should have had. So, it's obviously gonna be whatever the consensus is. I'm just putting that out there that I think I'd be more comfortable if there was a little more information about the other option. So I'm not saying no, I'm saying I'd like to know more about, maybe have another discussion with the